I'm Ronan O'Driscoll. I'm a respiratory physician at Salford Royal, and I've just been talking at the patient safety event about the change from News 1 to News 2 as a bedside and general use early warning system. News 1 came out in 2012 and it replaced dozens, possibly hundreds of individual hospital and other healthcare scoring systems. The idea was that if you were a nurse or a doctor moving around the country, you'd use the same system in every place you went, and it was well validated. However, like all new systems, it needed some refinement after a while of use, and this led to News 2, which came out in December 2017. There are two main changes from News 1 to News 2. One is in the oxygen section, and the other that I want to talk about is in the oxygen section, where there's a new score for patients with new onset of delirium or new confusion. In the oxygen section, some of the change is just a tidying up. It's easier to see what sort of oxygen the patient is using and what device they're using. The main difference is that in News 1, every patient was scored as an adverse problem if their oxygen saturation went below 96%. However, with News 2, it is recognised that a lot of patients, for example those with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, may be harmed by having too much oxygen, and for many of these patients their normal oxygen saturation is about 90%, and their target range that you're aiming at is between 88 and 92%. For these patients, if you give a lot of oxygen and put their saturation up in the high 90s, you may actually harm the patient, and clinical trials have shown increased risk of death when this happens. So to cover this risk, News 2 recognises that these patients have a different oxygen scoring system, and they get no points if they're in their target range of 88 to 92%, but they score News points if their saturation falls below 88% or if it goes above 92% on oxygen. However, obviously for these patients, if they're well and their saturation, say, is 95% on air, that's absolutely fine. But if somebody gives them oxygen and puts their saturation up to 99%, that's clearly dangerous, and that now flags up with 3 points in the new system.
My name is Emma Vardy. I'm a consultant geriatrician and the clinical dementia lead at Salford Royal Hospital. I also work as a clinical dementia lead for the Strategic Clinical Network of Greater Manchester and Eastern Cheshire. And I've come to the Health Innovation Manchester meeting today to talk about how delirium is assessed as part of the News 2. And this is really welcome because delirium is a major cause of mortality and morbidity. It's very poorly detected and around a third of cases are preventable. And the News 2 now has a section where new confusion will now score 3 points on the scale. The first message that I've wanted to get across today is that new confusion is delirium. And another message is that delirium is very much a diagnosis that affects critically unwell patients, and some people would term it an acute brain failure. What we have discussed at the meeting today is how you operationalise acute confusion detection as part of the News 2. Because there are various different tools that can be used to assess for delirium, but how can they be incorporated as part of regular daily observations? And we've done a really interesting piece of work with the different attendees today, looking at what tools people prefer to use and how often they should be assessed. And there seemed to be a relatively clear message that when delirium is present, it should always score 3 marks. There should be no variation from that. However, what there has been further discussion about is what tool to use, because there has to be a balance in terms of time constraints but the regularity of the observations. There seems to be an equal split between the 480 and the single question for delirium. And taking this forward, I'll be working with a Greater Manchester Collaborative Delirium Group and looking at a brief assessment for delirium that could be incorporated as part of the News 2. So that might be the SQUID, the single question for delirium, but there's also a very clear ask for a standardised assessment and management pathway, and I think that 4AT will be part of that.